I recently soldered together and fitted all of the block detectors, current detectors for the upper level track that I added earlier this year. And once I'd got it all done and working and up on this board and everything, I found myself asking, why? Block detection in JMRI is quite complex, and the structure of blocks as well. JMRI has a principal rule, and I don't know if other software is the same, but it has a principal rule with block detection and automation, and that is that every block must be contiguous. It's the word they use, and what that means is any track where automated trains are going to run has to be split into blocks. Those blocks must all be connected directly to each other, so there can't be any bits of track in between that don't have block detection on them. And every block must have detection. So no gaps, no bits of track without block detection. Absolutely everything has to be in a block and has to be detected by some kind of sensor. And of course that means a shed load of sensors, and not just a shed load of sensors, a shed load of sensors that have to work consistently and perfectly every time. Because if a single sensor that's detecting block occupancy doesn't trigger when an automated train goes over that block and doesn't send the message back to JMRI that that block went occupied, then that automated train stops and is almost unrecoverable, because JMRI has decided it's lost the train and that's it. So I think I've counted over 40 of these block detectors, although there's 2 per board, so 20 boards, over 40 detectors. There are well over 30 of the infrared sensors and getting on for 10 of the LDRs, and they all have to work all of the time. As for what those sensors are, well, that's down to individual need, I guess. To start with, I started putting infrared sensors in, and they're all over this yard, and they're meant to just detect the positioning of trains rather than the movement of them. So the infrared sensors all in the yard kind of detect which areas of the yard already have trains in them and where there are spaces for other trains to park. The need for these contiguous blocks does cause there to be a lot of short blocks around the place, particularly on double slips. So in order to have reasonably efficient short block detection, I've gone for light dependent resistors, and there's one just stuck right in the middle of that double slip there. The vast majority of the rest of the block detection, the actual track where trains move along, is controlled by these Merg block detectors. They're not vastly expensive. They probably average out between £3 and £4 per block sensor. They're just time consuming because they come as a bag of parts, and I had to solder them all together. So the question I'm coming back to again then is, what's the point? What is the benefit to the considerable cost in time and expense of covering this layout with yet more wire and all of these block detectors? Well, first of all, I get this panel, I guess, and the panel will show, it's a representation of my layout, and these lines that are going red around here represent the 3 trains that are running around the upper deck. So I get a visual representation of where trains are on my layout, and that starts to become more of a benefit when you take into account the lower deck. If I just move around here, where a lot of the track is covered up by upper deck baseboard and track. So when you start looking at the infrared sensors, there are 2 parking lines and one through line underneath this baseboard here, and the presence of the infrared detectors when I'm trying to park trains that I can't see is really quite useful, because they're represented down here, and I can see as a train pulls in, when a block goes red from grey, it means the train's just hit that block. I can stop it, and I've got more chance of parking trains without crashing them into each other. And in the case of trains where the front of the train incoming has a cupola on it, and the back of the train it's parking behind has a coupler on it, I was getting a lot of instances where the back train was going a little bit too far, coupling itself to the back of the train in front, and that was a bit of a tangle to sort out when you can't actually get at the trains that have coupled themselves up together. And personally, I did write this little tool that tries to predict collisions and short circuits and issues with points, and that's based on the block detection and tracking trains, and it is still something that I intend to complete and make a little bit more stable than it is, with a view to being able to distribute it if anyone was interested in using it. But the real point of adding all these block detectors and putting all of that work in is automation, and that's the process of configuring JMRI to drive trains itself, and the principal tool it uses to do that is block detection, because the continuous activation of blocks as trains make their way around the layout tells JMRI that a train is moving, and it's moving to where it's supposed to go, and the unexpected activation of blocks tells JMRI that there's a hazard ahead and allows it to take measures to avoid collisions. And that very quickly gets me to the question, well, what's the point in automation? For me, I do see some incredibly clever things with automation, people in clubs with large layouts, and they do some really clever stuff. But for me, kind of an amateurish hobbyist playing with wires and technology and trains in his loft, is the effort of all of that block detection, and then the vast amount of time it takes to learn about automation and to configure it in JMRI and make it reliable. What is the benefit of that compared to that huge investment of cost, again in terms of time and in money? And I have to admit that to start with, it was rewarding and fun. I've put a lot of time in, and I especially down here, I kind of got to the point where I could kind of get trains chained together in terms of one would leave the yard, do a couple of laps, do something clever, then come back and park, and that would trigger another one to go out. And it was really good. I remember spending a Saturday morning being hugely impressed by it all working. It was the culmination of months of work, and I sat that Saturday morning watching these trains, one after the other, leave the yard, go around, do some stuff, come back and park, and another one go. And for that Saturday morning, I was really quite impressed with it. But once I'd sat and experienced that, I didn't really have any desire to do it again. And there are all kinds of clever things you can do with automation that I never really went to. There's schedules. You can have a kind of a day clock running, and you can have a train schedule where at specific times that you set, certain trains leave and follow certain scripts. And you know, you simulate maybe a day in a station or something like that, and you can make it more interesting than just observe it, because there's this thing concept of semi-automated trains where the train is scheduled and it runs to a script that you've created, and as the train moves around the layout, the points and its route are set for it. However, you're driving it, you've got the throttle. So, you know, I guess that could be quite interesting. You schedule a day, most of the trains are automated, but every now and again one is semi-automated, which requires input of a human. You maybe have a number of humans all with their own throttle, and when your time comes along and you have to drive your train, then you do it. But all of the points are set for you, so it's just a case of getting the throttle and driving it. And I did do a video a while ago on that being an interesting concept, but how do you track the signal status? How do you know when to stop your train when there's danger ahead if you can't see the signals and you don't get the driver's point of view when you're driving your train around? And then there's the torturous process of speed profiling, which is absolutely required if you want control over how far inside a block and how smoothly automated trains come to a stop. There is also the time-consuming task of resistive wheel sets. Take the 37 as an example. All those trucks on the back I bought relatively recently, about a year ago, and I've never got around to putting resistive wheel sets on them. What that means, of course, is for all the block detectors that work on current draw, 37 at the front is fine because it draws current, but none of the trucks do. So take that back incline line as an example. I think the next block, or the break between blocks, is pretty soon after that set of points. So 37 comes across this way, and 37 passes that set of points, goes into the next block, and then this block that has the set of points in it goes unoccupied because all that's left is a bunch of trucks going over, none of which are drawing any current, so JMRI doesn't know they're there anymore. JMRI thinks brilliant, that's free, so I'm going to switch this set of points because there's a train down here, I want to come and do the crossover here. Switches that set of points with trucks, all this row of trucks halfway over, and bang, half of them are going down here, half of them are going down there, and I've got a great big mess to clear up. And it's not just a case of putting resistive wheel sets on the very last truck, because that's a long rake of trucks and some of my blocks are shorter than the length of that train. So you'd have, say you've got a block down here that stops there, you've got one resistive wheel set on the back truck, you've got a train at the front that's drawing current, but there's a block in between the two of them that goes unoccupied, so all these points get changed anyway. Going back to the presence-based detectors, it is of course possible to use a combination of the both. So you could have a piece of track that has a current detector on it and maybe have one of those light dependent resistors at each end of the block, and only when all three go unoccupied, so there's no presence at the start of the block, there's no presence at the end of the block, and there's no current being detected for the length of the block, then go unoccupied. That would be an option to avoid the use of resistive wheel sets. One idea I still did have for automation, and something I really fancied doing, involved this bay platform here. When I designed the layout, I decided I didn't want too much symmetry. So this is the only bay platform. There isn't one the other end of the station. That's kind of where that road thing's developing. So an issue I sort of realised I had with one bay platform is once a train leaves this one would leave in clockwise direction, then it's travelling clockwise all the time, and it's not going to have the opportunity, if it's treated as a shuttle, to come back into this bay platform without stopping somewhere and then reversing back. So I came up with this idea, if I just stand up a little bit, of way over in that corner over there, having, right by the blue, having a little branch line station, and it's kind of an offcut of the incline. And the idea would be a train ends up stopping in that station there for a little while, then heading back again and going back to the bay platform. And I thought it would be a good idea to try and automate that, so that every whatever it is, 10 minutes or so, a train leaves the bay and it comes and parks up there, stays there for 10 minutes and then heads back again. And I've written a lot of that software, the stuff about the danger early warning system and that kind of thing, to hopefully be able to handle that, in that I would have manual trains running at the same time. I would be driving trains, and if I had that early warning system and signalling system, I would get warnings that that train's set off, that the computer's driving it, and I would be able to adjust and stop any other trains that were heading for a collision with it before that happened. Now, I even got as far as actually configuring JMRI to do this and setting up this shuttle, and hopefully very shortly this Class 101 that's parked in the bay platform is going to demonstrate that. Now, spoiler alert, this isn't actually possible, but it is something. Oh, here we go, there's a few points changing, so yeah, here it comes, it's setting off now. So that's been triggered, and again, I wanted to include this because watching this kind of thing is really quite impressive. So it's going to head off now, and it's going to end up over in, I'm pointing at the screen, in that line over there. And there's another load as it's allocated sections. Those sections, as soon as they're allocated, the turnouts get set for the in favour of the train that's going to travel over them. So it's going to head out onto the incline, and it's going to go right round the incline and head into that bay platform there. And just out of interest, because this is kind of relevant to what I was planning, so round the end here, if I just bring this to the fore, and see right on the end here, that's where the train's currently travelling, and these yellow blocks here are the blocks that are allocated to that train. And as it goes around, I think these are long blocks, so it allocates 2 blocks ahead. It's just coming around that corner now. And the idea of the software I wrote was to be able to detect if 2 blocks ahead of the train that I'm driving, ahead of the manual train, are allocated to an auto train. Because if they were, I could then issue a warning and stop my manual train because there was a block that was allocated to an auto train, and it was a good idea to just stop and let that pass. It's now detected that it's in the penultimate section on its journey, so it's slowed down a little bit on the approach. The idea here, when it gets into the little branch line station here, would be that it waits for 10 minutes or however long, and then heads back again. But there's no point in me sitting and pointing a camera at it for 10 minutes, so there's no delay. It just comes to a nice speed profile assisted stop, and then straight away it's heading back again. Now, this is the important bit. This is the bit that stops me from doing this, which is a real shame. I mean, okay, it would be absolute bedlam if if I've got 3 trains running around these main lines and suddenly they get allocated to a train that's going to, like for example here, it's going to come in on this line, it's going to cross that line, and then it's going to go along that line. So that's going to affect, if there are 3 trains running around here at various points on the lap, it's going to affect all of them. So it would take a quick response now. But here's the problem. Imagine this twin pacer is travelling in this direction, and this double slip is set in its favour because I've set it manually, and that's the way it goes, that's the way it naturally is. Now, this twin pacer could be as far as here when this block gets allocated to an auto train that's coming up the incline. And if that happens, the instant that this block gets allocated to the automated train, the double slip's points get turned in its favour. And here it comes up now, so they've been setting, well, they would have been set in its favour, but they were already set because it went down that way, which would mean I get milliseconds of a response time to stop this train before I get a short circuit there. And that's the bit that I can't do. If we just watch this train come up again now, that's the problem. And I looked into it, and I even had the bit of software that I've got running, I had it allocating 2 blocks ahead of the manual trains, because that's where it was working, that was where it was checking, and this should come to a nice little stop at this platform now. So I was allocating blocks two blocks ahead, and I was assigning them values and doing everything that Dispatcher does when it assigns blocks. I think this should restart and come back again. Here we go. That's another one. There could be a delay there, but there was no point in it. So I was even assigning blocks, but the problem is, and I had to get help from the JMRI developers on this, is Dispatcher doesn't take any notice of assignment that's not done by Dispatcher itself. And in fact, what they told me is Dispatcher is not designed to run in conjunction with manual trains. Dispatcher expects to have full control of the entire layout, and it does not expect me to be driving. I don't know why that train stalls on that double slip. I've never worked it out. And it never stops, it just stalls and then starts again. But yes, so there's no expectation in Dispatcher that I will be driving manual trains while it's driving automated trains. It's simply one or the other. Either I'm driving my trains merrily and randomly around the layout and there are no automated trains whatsoever, or the exact opposite. Everything's run by automated trains and I can't be running my trains around randomly, at least not without incredibly high risk of collisions, short circuits and problems on points. So when I discovered that this idea I'd had for a while and that I'd built some of the layout around wasn't possible, I did kind of start off by going down the well, make it possible route. Could I have a sensor that triggers 30 seconds before this train leaves the bay, and that will say notify MQTT, and then I have something triggered by the MQTT message that will pre-allocate the blocks almost that this train's going to take, so that they are allocated and non-traversable even before the points change, to give me the warning time to stop trains from going over the points and having a short circuit, blah blah blah. But in the end, I just thought I could do all that and I could carry on doing what I've done here, but I'd still get bored of it. It would do it. I'd watch it work, and then just me in the loft, after sitting on a morning and watching it and thinking, oh, that looks really impressive, just not do it anymore. And then you build all of the other factors on that. It's not 100% reliable. So many things can go wrong. Sensors can't trigger, an LDR doesn't trigger. One of the devices, Arduinos or whatever, crashes and stops sending messages. There are so many factors and bugs in the software as well, I think, that can make it quite a stressful experience having everything running automated, certainly just for me on this layout and on a layout this size. And I think that sums it up then. And I although maybe, you know, I wouldn't, if I had the choice again, I wouldn't do it all again. The fact that it's all here is unavoidable, and it all kind of works. So maybe I will at some point get the itch and throw myself into the scheduling and timetables thing. And I'm sure there'll be other things at some point I'll probably give in and try and get this shuttle thing working again. And maybe now with that hindsight, thinking if I could go back in time a year and talk to the me that sat hovering over that first block detection board with that first blob of solder ready to fall on it, whether I wouldn't say to myself, maybe don't bother going down that route. Maybe learn to paint scenery and weather ballast instead. It'd be much more useful.